The Chevrolet Corvette, according to GM, is the most iconic American sports car, and it's an inseparable part of American history. And I do agree with that. The Corvette is an iconic American car, especially for the 1950s, and it plays a role in American history and is an icon of the era. Despite this, I believe GM should discontinue the Chevrolet Corvette and make a truly 21st century halo car that isn't beholden to the past. The current generation C8 Chevrolet Corvette is by all accounts one of the best sports car bargains currently available on the market. Good engine? Check. The GMLS-based engines are some of the best V8s in the business when it comes to reliable, affordable performance. Mid-engine layout, just like a Ferrari 488? Check. Fast-shifting dual-clutch transmission? Check. In Z06 trim, which is traditionally the mid-level option, the car produces 670 horsepower and uses a dual overhead cam design, just like every supercar in Europe. And GM has even started to make a high-quality interior. They've even won awards for it. It's a far cry from what was going on 15, 20 years ago. GM, with this car, made a vehicle that, in my view, surpasses the Ferrari F8 in every way. But it does it at less than a third of the price.
Okay, so while I was editing this video, I realized that what I said about the C8 Corvette surpassing the Ferrari F8 in every way was untrue. Here's the stats for both on the screen, and I still believe that for what they are, Ferraris are massively overpriced, and they're only for people who make their cars brand their entire personality. In comparison, to have a reputable shop install a twin turbo kit on a C8 is about $25,000 to $30,000, and you're looking at a car with 1,200 plus horsepower. All told, plus the car, about $100,000 spent. You could do this 3 times before you spend what most people would spend on a Ferrari F8. That's the real point, so please don't kill me. Okay, thanks.
However, there's a problem. It does not matter how good of a halo car GM makes. So long as the Corvette name is put on the car, there are going to be certain connotations of what it is. It doesn't matter if it's faster and more reliable than a Ferrari F8, Lamborghini Huracan, or McLaren 560S, because it's just a Corvette. It's not a real supercar. And as a result, Ferraris and Lamborghinis continue to get all the attention and hype from the Dubai Instagram types, despite being more expensive, less reliable, and objectively worse in every way. And despite the fact the car is good, whether GM wants to admit it or not, there is a stereotypical Corvette owner, and that image is not good. Because when I think of a Corvette owner or buyer, I think of one of 2 types of people. First type is a recently divorced, middle-aged white guy going through a midlife crisis. He's typically middle class, he's in his early 40s and 50s, and he's trying to recapture his youth. The other image I think of is the pot-bellied boomer man that is recently retired. He keeps his Corvette seamlessly polished. It's his baby. It lives in the garage, and he only drives it on Sundays to the golf course and the occasional Friday night cruise night. He shows up to the cruise night at the 24-hour diner to talk with his other boomer friends about how their Corvette is best Corvette. And this typical working-class white man, anywhere between the ages of 60 and 75, has a high likelihood of living in a retirement community somewhere in Florida. And he bought his Corvette after saving his hard-earned money. And now that he's in retirement, Barbara gives him the okay to splurge now. Yeah, she says it's okay to splurge now. We're doing well. And why is this? Because there's no penalties for withdrawing from the 401k once you get to that age. So there's a little more money to work with, even if they didn't really have a lot necessarily when they were working age. The common themes of these 2 things, it's always older white men, and they're always solidly middle class or below. Vietnam War veterans, I think of them a lot when this image comes to mind, as is any white man of a more blue-collar background that has a little bit of cash, but not necessarily a lot to work with. And while the Corvette was the embodiment of stylish American performance cars during the 1950s and 1960s, by the 1970s this was no longer the case. And like most American cars at the time, the Corvette had become a lazy cruiser that was all aggro, no performance, and add a healthy dose of flamboyant 1970s graphics on the side to compensate for the lack of performance due to suffocating emissions equipment. It wasn't particularly well built, the interior wasn't that great, and though the engine was the simple enough throw it in everything 350 Chevy small block, that emissions equipment really strangled the car. As a result, the late 70s Corvette wouldn't even beat a base model 2022 Honda Civic in a drag race. And don't even get me started on what happened to the California Special Corvettes in the early 1980s. Ugh. Corvettes ever since then, despite upgrades in performance and quality, never could break out of that branding rut. They were too high in price to be an affordable everyman sports car icon like the Mustang, yet they were always too cheap feeling to be aspirational in the same way as European supercars like Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Corvettes instead became just another cliche American cruiser. They're not truly aspirational, and they're in this perpetual limbo of desperately being trying to take seriously compared to things like Ferrari, Lamborghini, or even Porsche. Contrast that with the 2007 Audi R8. When it first launched, it started at $61K, which was about the same price as a mid-range Corvette for the same year. With a new name, with Audi having no history of making a supercar, this was a truly new concept. The fact it had a Lamborghini chassis underneath didn't matter. It was stylish. When it launched, it looked futuristic. It was a solid decade ahead of its competitors in terms of styling. And it was a perfect embodiment of Audi's corporate motto, Vorsprung durch Technik, for my pronunciation, or progress through technology. This flawless execution is why, in my view, it became the most iconic car of the late 2000s. And it was as iconic to me as the Lamborghini Countach was in the 1980s, and that's pretty high praise. Does it matter that an Audi R8 is going to cost more to maintain than a Chevrolet Corvette? No. Do the higher starting prices matter compared to the Corvette? No. The better quality interior compared to the C6 Corvette at the time certainly helped matters, but it wasn't the deal breaker. Why? Because at the end of the day, the Audi R8 was Iron Man's car. Tony Stark, the fictional billionaire inventor turned superhero, through a technical marvel of a flying suit of armor. Iron Man is cool. Superheroes are cool. And to put the association between a cool superhero and your Halo car, fantastic. But to associate it with a superhero whose story and image correspond nearly perfectly with your car's design and company's motto and philosophy, that is a once-in-a-generation success. That is brilliant. Unfortunately, though, at the end of the day, for the Corvette, it is not any of those things. It is always going to be an old man's car. For overcompensating recently divorced dads and pot-bellied boomer grandpas going to the golf course. Doesn't matter how you look at it, that's not cool. If you want a Halo car, you have to capture the hearts and minds of the youth. By those measurements, the Corvette is a failure. Nobody wants a car that their grandpa says, "Oh, you be good and this'll all be yours someday." No thanks, Grandpa. I'm good. The Chevrolet Corvette nameplate has run its natural course. It's time for it to be jettisoned. And though the C8 Chevrolet Corvette as a car is an excellent product, it would make even more sense if GM didn't shackle it to an old man's nameplate. How could they have done that? Well, by using a new nameplate. They could have pitched it as a competitor to the Ferrari F8, sold it that way. And that would have left GM a lot of room to make a proper Halo car in the same spirit as the Ford GT. And they could have done it even better because it would have had more reliable engines and LaFerrari rivaling performance. Who would go for any of those if they can get a LaFerrari performance at a bargain? Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like button, leaving a comment, subscribing to my channel. Also, be sure to check out my website, rationalmotoring.com. Link is in the description below. That's all for today's video. See you guys next time.